Hi, welcome to this lab session. So in this lab session, we are going to look at two storage types. That is EBS for elastic block storage, and then EFS, elastic file system, for shared storage, right? So what we are going to do in this session is create an EBS volume and then attach and mount it to an EC2 instance. We'll create a snapshot from the volume, we'll create a new volume from the snapshot, and then attach and then mount it to the instance, right? We'll test and verify if they worked, and we'll do this for both Linux and then Windows operating systems. And now we're going to look at EFS, which is a network file system. All right, we'll also create an EFS, attach it to maybe two instances, and then we'll try to do some operations in them to see how they work or how it goes. So I hope you enjoy this session. Kindly stay close and let's do this together. So to well appreciate this session, you need to have some understanding about EC2 instances, as in how to create EC2 instances, and to some extent security groups as well. I'm just hoping that you get to appreciate this, or try and then go back to the previous videos and then watch how we provision EC2 instances in order to appreciate this session very well. So first, I can just click on my EC2 and I'll go to instances, right, for us to appreciate the instance that we are going to use for this lab session or for this exercise. So we are going to use the lab EC2, right, this EC2, and we'll check the availability zone is at what? US East 1A. Great, super. So this is the lab that we are going to use. Already there is an EBS volume attached to it. That is the root volume, and it has what? A size of 8 GB. Great. So I will just scroll down to volumes, or I can just click on this volume ID and it will jump me straight to the volume session, right? I will clear this filter and then click on create volume. So you realize that we had two instances, right? So one is attached to the other. It's attached to each instance. One volume is attached to each instance. So when we scroll here, we'll be able to see the instances that these volumes are attached to, right? Great. So we'll now click on create volume, and I'll just allocate a size of 1 GB. I don't want, and then the availability zone is US East 1A. For tags, I'll name it. I'll use the name as a key, and then the value is a lab instance volume. Great. And then I'll now create the volume. Super. So now that I have my volume created, I'll have to wait for the status. Okay, it's available now. So when you create it, it takes some time to be in an available state, right? So I'll attach it. When I attach it to an instance, it will now change to what? In use. Great. So I'll just select the volume, actions, and then I'll attach the volume, and I'll attach it to the instance that was created. So that is the lab instance, and they must be in the same availability zone, right? And then let's take note of this device name. We are going to work with it. So the device is attached, and then this is the name. And for Linux systems, it may rename the devices to dev xdf. So let's take note of xvdf. Sorry, let's take note of these two names, right? We might see one when we are checking for the storage in our Linux system. So let's attach the volume. Great. So our volume is attached. When we go to the status, you can see that it is what? In use. Awesome. So let's go back to our instances to be able to appreciate what we have. Okay. So we can see that now the volumes are now 2. But what is happening is this. It's just like you physically attaching a new hard drive to your computer. You need to format the hard drive with a file system before you be able to use it. So this one is just like physically attaching it, but you have to format it with a file system and then mount it before you be able to use it. So this is what we are going to do. So to do this, we'll SSH into the instance. And we have a lot of ways to SSH into the instance. You can use PuTTY if you are using Windows 8 and below. You can use your command line or PowerShell if you are using Windows 10 and above. And if you are using a Linux PC, you can just use your terminal to SSH, right? Mac users as well, you can also use your terminal to SSH into the EC2. But there is a web version that makes things easier. That is the EC2 Instance Connect. So I'll use the Instance Connect for this session. So with my lab still selected, I'll click on Connect. Great. And I'll maintain everything as it is, and then I'll connect. All right, so now that my instance connect is connected and then we are into our EC2, we can do some commands to see if, so who am I? And then that is the EC2 user. So I am the user that has logged in into the system. So I'll just clear my screen. And first thing I'll check the storage to see. And then if I check the storage, you can see that none of the storage that I created is not here. We should either see dev SDF or dev/xvdf, but we don't have any of that here. So it means that in as much as the volume is physically attached to the instance, it is still not available for use. So this process that we are going to go through now will help us format the volume with a file system and then mount it onto our instance so that we can be able to use it. So first thing we have to do, a sudo will use the super user role, right? For this, we'll assume the super user role for this exercise. So every command I will enter sudo, right? So sudo and then mkfs. So the mkfs is the command for make file system, and then of type. So T, right? Type ex3. So this is one ext3, right? So this is one of the file systems that Linux operating systems are able to recognize, right? And then the volume name was what? Dev SDF. Okay, so what we are saying is that make a file system of type ext3 on the volume dev SDF, dev/SDF. So enter, and you can see that the process was successful, right? So now that the process is successful, we'll have to mount it, but we need to mount it to a directory, a mount directory. So first let's create the mount directory. So sudo and then make directory, and we'll put it at mount mnt/data store, right? Or you can choose to give it any name that you want. Okay, so I can choose mnt volumes, mnt, so depending on how you want to name it, right? But I will want to use the data store, then enter. So I've made my directory. The next thing to do is now mount the volume to that directory. Okay, and then right, so what I'm saying is sudo mount dev, so dev SDF, this is the volume, and then the mount directory. So mount it to this directory, press enter, and now it is mounted successfully. So we can do our df h to check the storage, and we can see that just as it was indicated in the creation, or when we attached it, the name has been renamed to what? Dev xvdf, and then the mounted it's mounted on where? MNT data store. Super. So we'll create some file on it, but first what we need to do is that we have to do a configuration, right? So that the instance will mount the volume, or it will mount this new volume whenever the instance is started. Now there is a directory called the etc/s tab that keep these configurations. So I'll add a line, right? I'll add a script to that directory or to that file, so that it will pick up, right? It will run, or it will tell the instance to mount the volume. So it's more or less like your kernel is going to load these configurations, right? So the kernel is going to load this configuration anytime the instance is started. So I'll do echo, and then I'll do my mount commands, right? Dev SDF, and then mnt data store, and then the file system is what, ext3. Use the default formatting standard, and then don't include the access time, then 1 2. So in as much as this is not a Linux session, I would just want to explain the command, right? So this is a command to give to or to store in the configuration file, so that it will just tell the EC2 instance to mount the volume anytime the instance is started. Okay, so to explain this command, so I've put the command in a string. Okay, now what is just saying is that this is the device or the partition, and this is the mount point, and this is the file system. Okay, so to explain, this is just to say the device that I want to mount. Okay, and then this is the mount point that I want the device mounted onto, and then the file system of the device partition, right? So it can be a different file system depending on your operating system or the actual file system of the device. So if this device was an NTFS file system, I'll change this one to what, NTFS. And then the default no A time, right, is they are kind of mount options. So it is saying that the default is saying that use the standard mount option, and then the no access time is just telling it to not update, right, not update the files when they are accessed, right? And then the one here is related to the file systems in the order in which the file system are checked. So one means is that the file system should be checked first, and then 2 is related to whether the file system should be backed up or not. So the value 2 means it should indeed be backed up, right? But that is not all of the code. Now I will introduce a pipe command. Now what this pipe operator does is that it says, it just interprets that, okay, use the output of the command of the left and use it as an input of the command on the right. And what is our command on the right? Our command on the right is sudo, so there should be a space, tee append, and then now append it to what, the etc fs tab. I think I've already explained this directory, right, as a directory that contains certain configurations that may be picked up by the kernel. Now let's start from the right. So the sudo is, as we all know, is the super user role, right? And then what this tee is doing is that it reads from this input, that is the output of what, this echo command, and then it will write it to this directory or file. So more or less like, okay, translate the output of this one and use it as an input here. And the A here is just append. So it's an option for the T command that, listen, when you are writing it, right, when you are writing the output of this command onto this directory, do not overwrite, but rather append. So whatever it is there will be maintained, and then this line of code is going to be what, be added. So that is basically what this command means. So I'll press enter, and then that is done. So to confirm, I will just cut into the etc f stub directory to check, and you can see that there are certain configurations here, but we have what, this one also added or appended into this directory or this file. And you can see that it didn't include what, the echo command. So it just took the output of the echo command and then used it as an input for this directory. So next, what we are going to do is to now check our story. I think we have checked already, but we'll still check, and then we can see that we have the volume here. Great. So now let's write some file into our volume. So I'll do sudo and then sh and then c. I'll put, I am writing some text into my new volume. Great. And we'll say put that into mnt data store, and save it as file.txt. So this command is saying that assume the super user position and then use the shell command, and the C is just saying that, sorry, I left something here, so when we get to it, so the C is just saying that my command is in a string, but interpret this string as what? As a command. So I have to add what we call echo. I can press enter and then my file is written. So I can check the file to see, and we can see I am writing some text into my new volume. I can also ls mnt data store, and I can see the file.txt there. Great. So now we have our volume created. So we have our file created in our volume. Let's go back to our EC2, and then we'll head to volumes, and in volumes we'll create a snapshot. So as I said, so now we've created a volume, attached and then mounted it. We have by formatting and mounting it to a directory, right? So, and then we've even put a file in it. So this is it, right? So what we are going to do is to create a snapshot from the volume, and then I will say my volume snapshot. Okay, and then I will not encrypt it. Let me change this. Create snapshot. So my snapshot is created. So I'll remove the file that I just created, right? So I'll do sudo and remove, and then file txt. All right, so I've removed the file. I can ls into the mnt data store, and you can see that the file.txt is not there. So let's go back to our instance, and this time we are going to go to snapshots, right? And then we'll create a volume from this snapshot. So actions, create volume from snapshots. I'll leave everything as it is, and I'll give it a new name. So I'll say restored. Sorry, the key is name, and then the value is restored, and I'll just do VL, right? Restored volume, create volume. Super. So we can even go ahead and then delete this snapshot after creating the volume out of it. So I'll go to volumes, and this is our restored volume. So I'll go ahead and attach the volume to our instance and check the device name, but it might be renamed to what? dev/xvdf. So if you can recall, the previous one was what? SDF, and then now it is what? SDG. So most of the time the device names are named just like you attach your hard drive to your PC, and then you have your local disk C. The next one will be local disk D, and it follows that number like that, right? So let's move on. So attach volume. So here you might have xvdg. You get it? So let's move on. Attach volume. So we can appreciate that by looking at the instances. So it's now attaching, but let's just go to the instance and lab instance. Let's go to storage, and we should have the 3 volumes here. So you can see the SDF and then the SDG here. We'll go back to our instance connect, and same way we will have to mount, but notice how we are going to do this one. So here we will not format the new volume with a new file system. Why? Because the snapshot was created from a volume that had already been formatted with a file system. So you create snapshot usually for backup purposes. In case you lose your old data, you'll be able to restore your backup, or you'll be able to restore from the snapshot that you created. So here we are not going to format it. We are just going to mount the volume and start using it, or start exploring the content of it. So first we'll make a mount directory, sudo make directory, and mnt slash, I'll just do it data store 2. Okay, I've made a directory, and then I'll do sudo mount, and then the volume is dev slash what sdg and mnt data store 2. Okay, so we've mounted the volume, and now we'll ls into mnt data store 2, and then we should have the file.txt here. So you might ask, why do we have it here? Remember, this is the backup volume, or the volume that we created from the snapshot. And if you could remember, we created this file before creating the snapshot. So it saved the file in the snapshot, and then we created a volume out of the snapshot. So whatever you do after creating a snapshot doesn't affect the snapshot. So as I said, you take snapshot for backup purposes. So the new volume still have the file, while the old volume doesn't have the file. We can ls into the mnt data store for the previous volume, and you can see that it doesn't have the file.txt. So that is basically about EBS volumes. I mean, creating, attaching, and then mounting, creating snapshots, creating volumes from snapshot, and then reattaching them. So whenever you create a snapshot and then you are mounting it again onto your instance, you do need to format it with a file system, because immediately you format it, it's going to clear everything from the volume, so you will not achieve your purpose. All right, so that is all about it. We are going to create a Windows instance and then replicate the same thing that we did on the Linux system on the Windows instance. So I'll go to launch instances, and we just say win instance. Okay, just for easy identification. So we'll choose Windows for operating system. For instance type, we will use a T3 small. For key pair, we'll create a key pair. Alright, so we'll create key pair, and yes, the PM, and we'll say win key pair. Let me just put it together. Great. Awesome. VPC, we'll leave it as it is. Security group, we'll leave it as it is. Yes, it enables RDP traffic, right? And storage, we'll also leave the storage as it is. We are not going to do anything here. So I will launch the instance. Great. Our instance is launched. We can view all instances. So I can close this instance connect since I'm done with the Linux. Okay, so our Windows environment is being initialized. Let me go ahead and then create a volume. Root volumes are deleted when you terminate the EC2 instance. It's a setting. You can choose to select delete on termination or disable that. But most of the times, root volumes are always deleted when the instance is terminated, depending on the setting that the user chose. But if you create any external volume, by default, the volume doesn't get deleted. Right? So this instance is in the US East 1C. That is the availability zone. So we have to also take note of that. So we'll go to volumes, and I'll create a new volume for my. So you can see the 30 GB now has been added, right? It's for the new Windows instance. So I'll I'll go to create volume, and the availability zone is US East 1C. Awesome. Yes, we are not creating it from a snapshot, and the size is just 1 GB, and then add tag. So key is name, and we'll say win volume, create. So I'm trying to do this while I wait for my EC2 instance to be ready, but let me try attaching it to see if it is available to be attached to. Okay, so the win instance is there, so you can see that the name is what, XVDF, and then attach volume. Awesome. So the volume is attached. Let me refresh and then go to, so you can see it is in use. Awesome. So let's go to our instances. Win instance, it is still initializing. I have to wait for a while. Let me go back. Okay, so now we have what, 2 out of 2 checks is passed. So now we can connect to it. So for this one, we'll still use this one, but we'll need another utility for Windows environment, and that is the RDP. So I'll open my RDP client, so remote desktop connection. Right, this RDP is from my personal PC. Okay, it's from my personal PC. So I'll choose RDP client, and I have to get the password for it. So the password, you will use the key pair, right? The key pair that we created when creating the EC2 instance. So I'll do upload private key, and from my downloads I should have it here. So this is the win KP that I created. Awesome. And then I'll just do decrypt password. So this is the password. I'll copy it, but first I need the IP address of the instance as well. So I'll come to the instance ID, and then we'll use the public IPv4 address. So I'll copy the public IPv4 address, and then now I'm good to go. So I'll paste the address here for the computer name and connect. I didn't specify a username, so it will ask me for a username. So usually what you can do is that you can go to show options, and then you can type a username here, right? Any other way also works. Okay, so you can just type administrator, right? So that was the username that was given on the instance connect, and that's, sorry, administrator. Good. Connect, and then now it asks for the password. So I'll paste the password that I copied. Okay, it is not here. So what I'll do is I'll go back to my connect client, get password, and decrypt. Okay, so I'll copy this password and now paste it. So you can see that this time it came with what, the administrator as a username. So if I hadn't, I can just go to more choices and then click on use different user, right? If I hadn't specified the name from the RDP opening window, right, I can just use a different user and I type the name. So I'll paste the password and okay. So it will load my Windows environment. So now that my Windows environment has been opened, I can go to my Explorer, right, and then go to this PC, and you can see that the storage that I attached to is, the storage that was first attached to when creating the instance, that is a 30 GB, but you can see 29.9 because some of the storage is used for the operating system and the file extensions, and then the file system like of the hard drive itself, and the OS has already used 15 gig already, right? Now it's left with what, the second volume, the 1 GB volume that we attached to this instance. So to do that, we open a disk utility. So I'll just go to start and then search for disk, and I should have this create and format hard disk partitions. So just like on the Linux system, right? So this is disk 1. This is the disk that I attached to it. Okay, the disk that I attached to it is what has appeared. So you must initialize the disk before Logical Disk Manager can access it. So I'll identify it as what, disk 1, and then okay. There is a command line utility called disk path that you can use to format your hard disk as well. But because we are using Windows and then we want to take advantage of the graphic user interface option, we will use the disk management utility, right, in the Windows operating system. So you can see that this is the disk that we created and then attached to it. So you can see the space is not what, allocated. That is why you cannot see it here. The allocated one is the one we are seeing here, the disk 0. That is that has the C as the disk path, right? So I'll right click this volume, and then I'll just do new simple volume. Next. Here I'll just go to next. Okay. So the drive letter D. You can choose any of the letters that you want except C, that is for this. And then next. Yes, and you can see the file system is what, NTFS. So for Windows you can have FAT, FAT32, NTFS, and then REFS. But we will choose NTFS for this one, and then we can say attached volume. Okay. And you realized when we were writing the script to the F stub, I said we did some configurations. So we default no access time and then the 1 2. So it's more or less like this. So the allocation unit size should be default, right? You can also choose the one that you want. There are different ones here. And then, we can also choose to do a quick format and then also enable file and folder compression. But for now, the quick format is okay for us. Next, and then finish. So you can see the volume is formatted and we see the volume here. Right, this is beautiful. So it's just like what we did in the Linux environment, where we formatted with a file system and then now created a directory to mount it to. Okay, and then we now mounted it onto a directory, and then when we checked, we realized that the volume was what was available for use. So now for the Windows version, this is what we just did. So I can open it just as I created a file. I'll create a text document. So I'll say text document, and I'll give it a name, file. All right, and its default saves it as what, a text document. I can do view and do file name extensions, and you can see that is what, file.txt, just like what we did in the in the Linux environment. So I've created this file in the attached volume. Okay, I've created it in the attached volume. So the next thing that I'm going to do is to go to my EC2 instance. So I'll minimize this. I'll go to my console, and then I'll create a snapshot from this Windows volume that I just created. So I'll select the volume, and from actions I will create a snapshot. Okay, and I'll say snapshot. Windows volume snapshot. Okay, just snap is okay, and create. So now that the snapshot is created, I will go to my Windows, and instead of deleting this file, I will just create a new file, a new folder. Let me see. Okay, so added folder. Right, so we've taken a snapshot of what, this volume, the previous volume that had only this one, and then now I've added a folder to the new the volume that I created. So what I want to check out is if when I create a volume from the snapshot that I created, I'll only have the file.txt, or I'll have it together with the added folder. Okay, so let's go to snapshots. So I'll select my snapshot, actions, create volume from snapshot, availability zone, US East 1C, add tag, name, restored win VL. Great. I'll create volume and I'll go to volumes, restored win VL, and then I'll attach the volume to our Windows instance that is running. So you can see the device name, attach. Super. So the next thing that we are going to do is go to our Windows, and then when I scroll down, I should see the new volume that has been attached currently. But what it's saying is that it is offline because it has a signature collision with another disk that is online. Yes, because we created the volume. So what is happening is that because we created the volume, or we created a snapshot, right, from a hard disk drive that already had a file system, so it's like it saved every information about it. But that is no problem. You can just right click this. Okay, we can right click here. Don't right click here. When you right click here, you only see this. You can just right click here, click online, and then the device will now be online with a new, so it's automatically done, right? So the signature will be rewritten so that it will have a different signature, and then it doesn't collide. But then you can see that the volume is what's it called? It's still the same. Okay, the name is still the same, but it's just the drive letter that is different. Okay, but everything that came from it is because the snapshot was created from the already attached volume, okay, or the volume that we originally created. So the naming and then a lot of file systems, in fact everything about it is the same, but the drive letter, because you can have two drives with the same drive letter, so now the drive letter is the only difference that we can use to know this. Okay, we can go to this PC again, and this is the new volume that is attached. We can rename it from here. Okay, so restored, right, and then we'll just say VL. Fine, that will not affect anything. So you can say the change has been affected here. Now let's open our restored VL, and you can see that we have only the file.txt here, right? Meanwhile, the volume that we created already had what? We added another folder, but this one didn't appear. Okay, because the snapshot was created after this file was created, and then before the folder was added. Okay, so when we open this, where is it? The restored, and then we open, you can see there is nothing in there because I didn't write any text in it. I just created the file. So that is just about it on EBS volume. So we have looked at the Windows version, and then we have looked at the Linux version. So that is about it on EBS volumes and then EC2 instances. So I can just close this, right? Go to my EC2. I'll go to running instance, and I'll terminate this instance. Terminate. Okay, and I can go to the volumes. So once my instance are being terminated, I can even go to the volumes and then check. So you will see that this 30 GB is going to disappear, because when you come here, you can see there should be a settings that says, so I will see it in the instances. So instance, storage, and when I go here, you see what? Delete on termination is yes for the 30 GB, but for the other storage that I attach is what? No. So when I go to volumes, if my instance is terminated, let me refresh till, okay, let's wait for a while. Okay, so I think it is once it's been terminated, you can see that no block devices attached to this instance. So it means that it has been terminated. So the volume, that the root volume has been deleted, and the other volumes, let's say the external volumes that I attached, has been what? Detached. So you can see the root volume is this one. Let me refresh. Then now it's no more here, and these two volumes that I attached has been what? Detached. And you can see the status what? Available. I can go ahead and then delete this as well. I am deleting them, I'm cleaning these up because to prevent cost. Okay, we are just doing it to prevent cost. Okay, great. So that is it for EBS volumes and an EC2 instance. We'll look at EFS next. So for EFS, we'll just head straight to what? EFS. So if you don't have this, you can just search EFS from here. Okay, and then you can select what? EFS here, but I'll just go to file systems. So by now you should be familiar with the, all right, so I jumped straight into there, so you can see it's EFS here and then file systems. So that is just the shortcut that I used. Okay, so I'll go to create file systems, and I have this wizard to simply create my EFS, but I would want to explore other options. So I'll go to customize. So now I'll give it a name. I'll say test EFS. Okay, and the storage class, you have standard and then one zone. So one zone is more like a cost optimized one when you don't need your data across multi AZs, right? And then you want to also save costs, so it just stores the data in one zone. But normally people will use the standard for multi availability zone storage. Automatic backups enabled, and lifecycle management is just to tell how your files are accessed. So you can choose what? Either 1 day, 7 days. So if your file has been 30 days since the last access, then it will transition into what? The infrequent accessed storage class, right? And then you can also choose the transitioning. So you can also say transition out of the infrequent access class on first access. So after 30 days, when it moves to the infrequent access, and then let's say the 31st day or the 32nd day somebody access it, then it will move back to what? The standard or the frequent access storage class. Okay, so most of the times this is the kind of life cycle that most blogs use. So news trends for, let's say, maximum 3 weeks, so you can set it, right? Let's say a 14-day, or you can give it a 30-day life cycle, and it will just move into what? An infrequent access. And what happens is that most of them will use the none. So it means that whether somebody access it or it's not, irrespective of the number of access after it has moved to the infrequent access, it will still remain at the infrequent access storage class. As encryption, yes, encryption of data at rest. There is other customized settings where you can create a KMS key, right? But we'll leave this, and we'll come to the performance settings. So normally the performance settings, you have best in, you have elastic, and you have provisioned. Okay, so the enhanced is just to group the elastic and then the provisions. Now the best thing is just that, okay, we'll look at the number of storage or the amount of storage that you are using, and then we'll give you the throughput. And throughput here is just the rate at which data is transferred. That is the simplest explanation that I can give. So the rate at which data is transferred is what we call what? Throughput. Okay, so we'll provide you the throughput based on the amount of storage, or for workloads that you used. Okay, and then elastic says that, see, okay, you don't know the storage that you are using, you don't know the throughput that you need, so you use the elastic. So as and when you are using it, the throughput is going to scale automatically, right? And then you only pay for what you use. And the provision is that, okay, you are sure of the storage that you are using, and then you are sure of the throughput that you want. So you can specify the throughput. So let's say if I put 200, and then I will have to pay, right? Throughput bill can be up to 1,200 a month. So it means that for that, this one you have to pay for it. Okay, we are going to stick with the elastic, and there is also additional settings. So for the performance mode, you have either general purpose or max IO, but if you choose the elastic, you only have general purpose to choose. But if you go with the best thing, you can choose between max IO or general purpose. And if you also go with provision, you can also have the option to choose in between the two. Okay, we'll stick with elastic. So tags, we can also give it a name, but since we have a name here, it's okay, right? Sorry, so the name should be EFS, not SFS. So what am I typing? So EFS. Okay, test EFS. Okay, and yes, we'll not give it a tag. This one is okay. So the tag is more or less like you to organize your resources. I'll go to next. I think there is something that I'm missing. Elastic, transition. No, this one is depends on what I want. I think it has to do with the tags. Remove tag, great, and then next. So for network access, this one uses the default security group. Okay, but what I'm going to do is I'll create a new security group and then now attach it to my instance. So I'll go to services, so EC2, and I'll open EC2. Okay, and I'll go to security groups. So I'm just using a shortcut. Okay, but normally you can just navigate through VPC and then you create what security groups. But you also have security groups option here, and this one seems to be the shortest route for me, so that is why I'm using it here. But you can just search VPC, so it's under networking. Okay, and then I can come to VPC and I can scroll down and I see under security we have security groups. It's the same thing. Great. So I'll create a security group and I'll say is what EFS SG. That's EFS security group, and I'll add EFS security group as my description. VPC default. I'll not add any, so I'll not allow any inbound rule, right? So the reason why I'm doing this is that this security group doesn't have any allow rules. Okay, it doesn't have any rules, so it means that nobody access. So it is not like I'm not going to allow HTTP or SSH into the security group or into the EFS. So that means is that except me, nobody else will be able to like come into my EFS, right? So it's for security purposes. That is just what I'm trying to do. Okay, so I will leave the rule bare, and then I'll come to my EFS and I'll have to refresh, right? So that the security group will be recognized. Okay, so I'll just have to do this again. Test EFS, but I said that everything is okay. So for the transitioning, yes, I wouldn't want it to transition out of the infrequent access. So let's say I'm using this for a block site. Okay, for additional settings, I'll leave it as it is and I'll go to next. So for network access, I'll remove these security groups. Yes, so this is our security group that we created. So EFS SG, super. So yes, I've attached the security groups to all the subnets. So we have about 1A, 1B, 1C, 1D, 1E, 1F. So there are about a lot of availability zones in the North Virginia, and then a subnet has been created for all of them. Right, so I've selected the security group for all those availability zones as well. And then EFS is a network file system, so you are able to attach it to instances across different availability zones, and we are going to look at that shortly. All right, so for file system policy, I'll leave it. This is more or less like an advanced and then complicated method, but yes, depending on your requirement, you can choose them, and then it's populate the JSON, or if you are good with writing the codes, you can also specify those rules by yourself or the policies by yourself. But I will leave this as it is. I'll go to next. I'll review. I think what I have here, I'm okay with it. Okay, you can see the security groups attached, and I'll create the volume. So now that my volume is created, I'll create an EC2 instance. Okay, I'll create 2 in different availability zones anyway. So I'll search for EC2, select this, instances. I'll click on launch instance, and I'll do instance 1. Okay, I'll use Amazon Linux. Everything will be as it is. The Linux AMI, T2 micro, key pair. I'll move on without the key pair because I'll use instant connect, so I don't need a new key pair, right? So I'll leave security settings for a new security group to be created for as that's launch wizard 2, and for network settings I'll come back to it. But for storage, so this is where we attach our EFS file system, right? So I'll go to edit, but what do I see here? It says what I currently have no file systems on this instance, and I must select a subnet before. So I'll come back to my network settings, select a subnet. So I'll use the 1D AZ. Okay, and now I have the option to add a shared file system. So I'll add, and then it will automatically select because that is the only EFS that I have. And then the mount point is what? FS1. Super. So I can go ahead and then launch the instance. Okay, so now that this one is done, I'll go ahead and launch another instance, and this one will be instance 2. Okay, Amazon Linux, everything as it is. Key pair, I don't want any key pair. Okay, and for network settings, I would edit it, and then this time I'll put it in a different AZ. Okay, so the other one I choose 1D, this one I'll choose 1C, and no, so I'll select an existing, so the one that was created for the previous instance, right? So that was launch wizard 2. Great, this one. So storage, edit, and add shared file system, and you can see the mount point is what? EFS FS1, the same mount point, and launch instance. Great, so I'll go to my instances. Great, so now I have both of my instances running, and then what I can do is to go to my EFS console. Okay, and then I'll go to file systems, and let's see what happens. So I'll select it. Let me just click on it. Okay, and if I go to network, you should see the security groups that has been attached to my instances. Okay, so US is 1A, so you can see all the security, the one that I attached, and the ones that was so it's like every security group is being referenced to each other, right? So they are the same security groups that have been attached to them. So I can go to my instances, let's say instance 1, and then if I look at security, I should be able to see the security groups that have been attached to it. And then for the inbound rules, you can see these are the inbound rules that has been allowed, right? And one of the inbound rules is allowing what? TCP protocol, and from what? The destination, the SG, and then the instance SG. So I can even go ahead and then investigate this security group as well. You can see that there will be one that will allow NFS traffic into my instance. Okay, so this one doesn't have. any allow rules. Let me look at the launch. So you are able to investigate all the security groups or everything that has been attached to your instance. So let me see the inbound rule for this one. So this one allows what? SSH. There's another one, the inbound rule. Okay, this one also doesn't have any inbound rule allowing the traffic. Let me see this one. And so you can see this is the security group that allows what? NFS. And then through what? The TCP protocol, and then the port range is what? 2049. Super. So you can see all these security groups has been attached to each availability zone. And do you remember the mount point? We'll do that, and then we'll go through each of the instances, or we'll SSH into each of the instances in order to appreciate what we have. So I will do instance connect into instance 1. Okay. And then I'll just connect. I'll close this one. And I'll do instance connect into instance 2. Instance connect. Great. So I'm waiting for both of them to load. Okay, so I can do DFH to check the storage, and you can see this is the NFS mount point. And if I do DFH, you can see the same mount point here, right? So I will do ls into the mount point of our EFS, right? So ls mnt. So this is on the instance 2, right? mnt. Let me remove one of the backslash fs1, and you can see there is nothing there. So I will assume the super user role. Okay, so there are ways that you can actually do or assume the super user role. So first I can just do sudo and then su. So immediately I do this, it means that for the period that I'm still on this instance, I have the super user, so I don't have to use the sudo command anytime I'm writing a new command, right? So I'll do echo, and then this is a text on my EFS, and realize that we created these instances on separate availability zones, right? Not on the same availability zone. If you remember, we put one at 1D, US East 1D, and then we put one at US East 1C. Okay, so this is a text on my EFS, and then put this text into mnt fss1, and then test file .txt. okay, so enter. So we can ls, let me ls into the mnt efs1, and we'll be able to see. Okay, so let me just do a cut, and mnt fs1 file, sorry, it's test file.txt, right? So if I press enter, this is a text on my EFS. If I do ls to mnt test file.txt, so you can see that we have the file there, right? I can even do fs1 just like this, and then you can see that I have the test file.txt there. Now this is on instance 2. okay, so I'll go to my instance 1, and then I'll just do ls, so I'll just copy this command, okay, and I'll do, let me clear the screen, okay, and I'll just do paste, okay, and enter, and you can see that the test file is here, right? This is on instance 1, right? I can remove, okay, rm mnt efs fs1 test file.txt. So I'm removing, I created a file on instance 2, and then I'm removing the file from what, instance 1. Now I'll do, so I'll have to assume the sudo role, if not it will not work. Okay, let me just do the rm and see if it works. So remove is what, write protected, right? I can't do it, so I have to use the sudo. So I have to exit from this by pressing Ctrl C, and then now I have to add the what, the sudo. Okay, so there are two ways. I could have just done the sudo su, and then I can just type my rm.mnt straight. I can just add the sudo command to this, and then I should be able to delete the file, right? And let me do ls into fs1 again from the instance 2, and you can see that the file has been deleted. Okay, so this goes to show that the EFS is what, it's a shared file system. So if you have your instance distributed across multiple availability zone, you are still able to attach just one EFS volume to what, multiple instances. Unlike EBS that has one EBS volume to one instance, or one instance to multiple EBS volumes, but you can attach one EBS volume to multiple instances. But for EFS is more or less like a network file system, and it's a shared file system, so you're able to attach it to multiple instances. I can launch another instance in another availability zone and then attach the same EFS to the instance, and then we'll be able to share the same file, or I mean, we'll be able to share the same storage and then put our stuff in there. So that is it on EBS and then EFS storage. So in this session, we looked at creating an EBS volume, attaching it to an instance, creating a snapshot from the volume, and then attaching it again to the same instance. And then we looked at setting file manipulations to appreciate how EBS works, and then we now created an EFS, attached it to two instances in different availability zones. We did some file operations to also appreciate how the EFS worked. I hope you enjoyed this session. I'll see you in another lab session. Thank you.